If you do the 4 things I'm about to tell you, you will be a completely different person going into 2026. I'm going to give you my 4-step framework that helps me reinvent myself and start walking in my purpose so you can make the best of the last few months of the year. These are not going to be random tips. This is going to be an actual plan that you will need to take notes for, because I'm going to give you the blueprint to actually get results and become the best version of yourself. If you follow these 4 steps, not only will you make significant progress, but it will be intentional, it will be aligned, and you will actually feel like your life is actually improving and in the right direction versus doing a bunch of really good things that don't really move the needle in your life. But if you are new here, welcome or welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Sensi, and on this podcast, we talk about taking accountability for your life to become the best version of yourself. So the first step in the framework is your vision. You need to create or define a vision for a specific area of your life or your entire life if you have that type of clarity. When I say create a vision, I am also not talking about vision boards and cutting out a bunch of pictures. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm a visual person. I do that. If you need to do that, that's great. But before we get to the pictures, before we get to the arts and crafts, let's talk about how to practically do this in a correct way that will actually get you results, okay? You do not need to have every aspect of your life planned out. You do not need to know every detail because those things can change. But when I say you need to create a vision, the reason why this is important is because you need to have a general direction for where you want your life to go, or where you want specific areas of your life to go, what you want specific areas of your life to look like. Because it's very hard to hit a moving target, and you cannot hit a goal that you never set, right? When you don't have goals, when you don't have a vision, you are literally drifting in life. That's how you get to a point where you feel like your life is just doing anything, like you're just dilly-dallying. You feel like you're drifting, you feel like you don't have a sense of direction. It's because you have not created the target. You have not created the target for your life to move towards. So you're literally just drifting anywhere your boss tells you to go, or your friend tells you to go, or your parents tell you to go, or your significant other tells you to go. You have no direction for your life. That is why you need a vision. And when I say vision, I'm not talking about anything elaborate. I just need you to have a bare minimum idea of what you want a specific area of your life to look like. And we're talking in specifics because I don't want you to get overwhelmed and think you need to have an overall vision. So there are 6 categories that I like to think of when it comes to creating my vision. There's self, all things regarding you, personal development, your mind, intellect, faith, all the things that make up you as a person. There's impact, and the reason I call it impact is because we need to be intentional in making sure that what you do with your life creates an impact or has an impact in this world. Because if I just say career, then it might be easy to just put a job title there or something like that, but you can have an amazing job and still feel like you're not making an impact or not making a difference. That is why I specify impact. So self, impact, health and fitness, community. Community just means relationships. So your friends, your family, significant others, your network, your acquaintances, that type of thing. Your wealth or finances, all things to do with money and money goals, that type of thing. And then lifestyle. So different aspects of your lifestyle, material possessions, what you want your lifestyle to look like, hobbies, recreation, that type of thing, right? So these are the 6 categories for coming up with your vision. So it does not need to be like an overall vision for your life, though you can have that. But I want you to keep these 6 categories in mind because that is what we're going to be working with, okay? And the key thing here is in the next 90 days, right, on this sprint that you are going to do to reinvent yourself and start walking in your purpose, the key thing to remember here is that you are not going to be focusing on all of these areas. You are going to be focusing on 2 to 3 areas max. And the reason why 2 is the minimum, because self will always be one of the areas that you work on, and I will explain why in a second. But the key to this is not prioritizing more than 2 or 3 areas, because one of the biggest mistakes that we make is trying to change our entire lives in a short time span, or even if it's a long time span, we try to do too many things at once and we just end up spreading ourselves thin, trying to be a jack of all trades and a master of none, or giving like 33% in each area or 10% in each area. So you don't actually see significant progress in your life in general because you are spreading yourself too thin. So when it comes to the vision, you are going to prioritize 2 areas, and these 2 areas are going to be the 2 things that if you were to accomplish your vision, your goals in these two areas of your life, above everything else, they will make you feel the most accomplished than if you worked on anything else. So I will use myself as an example to explain it to you. So my priority in the first half of the year, for example, was self and impact, right? I knew that if I prioritized myself, my personal development, my relationship with God, continuously reinventing myself and being the best version of myself, challenging myself, healing, building my confidence, etc. And if I focused on my impact, i.e., the impact that I have in this world, growing my podcast, growing my brand, focusing on my purpose, honing in on that, I knew that if I prioritized these two things above other things, if I accomplished the goals in these two categories, I will feel more accomplished than if I do anything else. So that is what I focused on, because health is a core value of mine. I prioritize eating healthy and all of that. But at the same time, if I had tried to prioritize health and fitness during this time, if I only had the capacity to work on two things and I focused on health and my health was doing well and I was hitting certain milestones in the health, but I was falling short in the self or falling short in impact, I would not feel accomplished. I would not feel like I'm really doing the things that matter to me the most at this point in time. So I chose to schedule health and fitness for a different season of my life and prioritize self and impact, right? It's not saying that you don't care about the other things. It's just saying that you can still give to those areas, but they cannot be the priority, because no matter how well you might do in these areas right now, if these two areas over here fall short, if the two priorities fall short, you will not feel as accomplished as you would like to feel, because you would have prioritized the wrong things or things that really would not move the needle in your life. Okay, so that is what I mean when I say vision. Create a vision. What are your goals? What do you want those two areas of your life to look like? And you need to think, if I accomplish this, if my life looks like this in these areas, I would feel like I have made significant progress. I would feel like my life is going in the right direction. I would feel like I'm really making a difference. And it's not to say that you are deriving a sense of fulfillment purely on those goals, but it's just saying that if you put your energy here, that will give you the most reward. So that's the first thing, your vision. Okay, create a direction for your life. Pick two categories out of the 6 that I named. Define what you want your life to look like in the next 90 days or in the time you have left before 2026. What is feasible enough to accomplish, but it's still a challenge to push you outside of your comfort zone, that if you were to achieve these things in those two categories, you would feel the most accomplished going into 2026. The second step in the framework is reinventing yourself. Now, when I say reinventing yourself, I am talking about making sure your values and your identity and your actions align with the person you need to be for the vision that you have in these areas of your life. So let's use another example of somebody who wants to ultimately become a C-suite executive in their corporate career, right? You want to climb the corporate ladder and you eventually want to be, say, a CEO, right, of a company, and you've defined what you want the vision to look like. You need to start reinventing yourself, or otherwise adopt the identity of that person who is going to be a CEO and start embodying them today. So how do you do that? The first thing is to align your values with that of a CEO. What type of values would a CEO have? Maybe they would have leadership as a value, right? Because obviously they'll be in a position of leadership. Or maybe something specific like servant leadership, because that defines what type of leader they want to be. And the reason I'm specifying values is because your values dictate your actions. Your values dictate how you set your life up. For example, health is a core value of mine, so I do certain things that always make sure I'm prioritizing my health. Even if health and fitness is one of the primary categories that I'm prioritizing right now, because it is a value of mine, I still make sure I do certain things like get the healthier milks that don't have all of the extra ingredients, or try to eat more whole foods than supplements, and healthy foods overall, because when something is a value, you embody it. When it's a value, you do it because that's the type of person you are. It's a lot harder to try to eat healthy if health is not a core value because you see it as a burden, you see it as a chore, you see it as a habit that you have to form. But when something is a value, you just say, I am a healthy person, therefore I eat healthy. It becomes something natural, something normal, right? So in the example of a C-suite executive, if you're saying that that is your goal, then your values might be things like leadership or whatever else, right? Depending on what type of leader that you want to be, what type of C-suite person you want to be, or how you want to create your impact. So you start aligning your values with the version of you that already has that thing. And to also reinvent yourself, the primary way you do that is by shifting your identity. An example of how I shifted my identity is initially when I started creating content, my identity that I adopted was a content creator. Because I adopted the identity of a content creator for so long, I always focused on creating content. That was my primary thing because that's what a content creator does. When I realized that I actually wanted to be an entrepreneur and have a business, I had to shift my identity to a business owner. I had to shift my identity to an entrepreneur, because when you shift your identity in that way, now you focus on things that an entrepreneur would focus on, like monetization, like revenue, like marketing, like hiring a team, that type of thing. But when my identity was a content creator, all I focused on was creating content. I had to do an identity shift. And then once I did that, now suddenly I'm thinking how an entrepreneur would think, which is how I should have been thinking to begin with. You see what I mean? Your identity needs to align with that vision. So an example of a person who wants to be in a C-suite position, your identity now needs to be a CEO. So how does a CEO act? It doesn't matter if you're an analyst right now. It doesn't matter if you're a consultant. It doesn't matter if you're just a manager. It doesn't matter if you're just a senior manager. You need to take on the identity of a CEO because that is your ultimate goal. And when you start functioning like that person, your executive presence will increase in the workplace. It will change how you show up. It will change how you perform. It will change how you react to your team because you're thinking from the standpoint of a CEO. And if you don't know what that's like, start interacting with CEOs more, watch interviews, etc. Which brings me to my third point. The third step, so far we have number 1, create your vision. Number 2, reinvent yourself, right? Through updating your values and your identity and starting to embody that version of yourself. The third is upgrading your standard. So your standard is essentially what you accept as your norm. So when we talk about upgrading your standard, we're talking about upgrading your norm, upgrading what you're used to, upgrading your bare minimum. Raise the bar on your bare minimum slightly higher over time. And that is the most attainable way to eventually change your identity, change your habits, change your life essentially, because you're starting small and you're just raising the bare minimum in your life. So in our example, here are some ways that you can upgrade your standard. If you want to climb the corporate ladder, you are going to have to be active on LinkedIn, right? Your primary form of social media right now should be LinkedIn, or at least it should be added to your rotation. If you're adopting the identity of a CEO, you know that is your path. You know that's your vision, your ultimate goal in life. You need to be one of those active people on LinkedIn that are posting these think pieces. You need to follow CEOs on LinkedIn, see what type of posts they make, start embodying that to the best of your abilities, because that is your goal, right? So maybe your standard, your norm right now for social media is Instagram and TikTok. Upgrade your standard by adding LinkedIn to the rotation. Maybe your norm right now on LinkedIn, the way you show up is you just have, like your job, you don't have a description, you just have like a bunch of random stuff, no endorsements or whatever. Go on a couple of CEO pages, look at how their profile is optimized, and you're going to upgrade your standard and optimize your LinkedIn profile like a CEO's profile would be optimized. And then you can also say in your life, okay, well, a CEO typically has to deal with a team. It's about relationships when you get to a certain level. So I need to start doing better with my team. I need to start building relationships, building my professional network. So upgrading your standard might look like adding one professional networking event to your calendar of events. Maybe every month or every quarter, right? Go to professional networking events in your field so you can expand your networks. CEOs make decisions and they manage relationships. They build relationships with people. They build partnerships with people. You need to upgrade your standard and start doing that in your life right now. Upgrade the way you show up at work to just clocking in and clocking out, or logging in and logging out, to now, if there's a happy hour every now and then, make sure you show up, because a CEO CEO would make sure that they are there. If a CEO or somebody in a high level position in corporate comes into town, or there's some type of office event happening, they usually show up and like talk to people. They usually establish that executive presence and, like try to connect with people in the office. So if you know your ultimate goal is climbing the corporate ladder, working your way up to CEO, you need to start embodying that today, okay? And these are very small things that you can start doing. And they compound over time. That's the key. They will compound over time and produce results. Because today, when you're upgrading your LinkedIn profile, you're not thinking anything of it. When you're making these posts, you're not thinking anything of it. But as time goes by, people start to look at you like, who is this person? Because you have this position, but you seem so professional. You have this position, but you upgraded your headshot, your profile on LinkedIn. Instead of having an AI generated headshot, or instead of having a picture that you took in your office or in your home with a plain background, you upgrade your standard and you have a professional headshot. Maybe you take professional photos, or you do whatever. Maybe it's the AI, but it looks very realistic. You upgrade your standard in small ways. You raise the bare minimum of how you show up. You show up slightly better each time, and that compounds over time. When we try to make big changes, whether it's in a big amount of time or a small amount of time, sometimes it can feel overwhelming. But when you just compound these small things over time by starting to embody the version of yourself that already has that thing, that is what gets you results, right? And it also helps you to stay consistent because it's small enough to keep doing, so it's easy to implement, right? So that is how you upgrade your standard. You upgrade your bare minimum in different areas of your life that will help you move towards that goal. And the fourth and final step is refining your purpose. So now we're talking about the infamous topic of your purpose, your God-given purpose. Why were you put here on this earth? If there is one thing I can tell you, is that a lot of times the reason you don't know your purpose is because you have not become the version of yourself that is ready to unlock the next step. You're simply not ready. You're not that person. You cannot handle it yet. When you become the version of you that can handle what's next will naturally unfold. Take it from somebody who used to cry and plead and beg God to tell me my purpose back in college, because I was studying to become an accountant, and I was like, God, I don't want to be an accountant. I like math, but I can't see myself doing this for the rest of my life. Please tell me what my purpose is. God did not answer me. Okay? He did not. He talked to me about everything else but that question. And in hindsight, I realized that when he did start making the path clear and giving me different steps, it was as I became the version of myself that was ready for it. Because when I was crying to God back then, telling him what's my purpose, if God had told me to get a mic and start talking online and create YouTube videos, I would tell him double it and give it to the next person. I wasn't ready. I cared too much about what people thought. I wasn't in a position where I was strong enough to do that. And in his grace and mercy, he did not tell me it at a time where I could speak against it. That is why the first 3 steps are crucial, because they will help you improve your life and step into the version of yourself that is ready for the next step. So that is why I told you that you pick 2 aspects of your vision max, and one of them will always be self. Because step 2 and 3, reinventing yourself and upgrading your standard, are a part of the things that you do for yourself. And you always have to work on yourself. You always have to be focusing on your personal development, personal growth, your skills, your faith, that type of thing, in order for you to perform at a higher level. You see what I mean? That's why self will always be one of the categories that you focus on for your vision. And then the other category is really the main priority that you want to do. But you just have to make sure that you're prioritizing your personal development so that you are becoming the version of you that can handle the thing that you are working towards. Now, when it comes to refining your purpose, as you become the best version of yourself, as you reinvent yourself, as you upgrade your standard, as you do all of these things, God will start revealing the next steps to you. And the way you refine your purpose and get that clarity that you need to execute on it in a strategic way is what I deemed the AIM framework, AIM, Avatar Impact Method. Your avatar is basically who you are serving. Who are you trying to help, right? If you create content, who is your primary audience? That's your who, that's your avatar, that's who you're trying to serve. If you create a business, who is your primary customer? That's your who. The I for impact coincides with the impact in your vision category, right? But in this sense, it's like getting more granular and creating a 1-sentence statement that helps you identify your main objective when it comes to your purpose. For example, my impact statement is I help you become the best version of yourself and walk in your God-given purpose. Now, I just added the purpose piece at the end of it because I realized that the reason why I want to help you become the best version of yourself is because I want you to walk in your purpose. But if you are not new here, you would know that for the past 4 years that I've been doing this podcast, my intro has always been to help you take accountability for your life to become the best version of yourself, right? That is the impact that I'm trying to make. The impact is basically how you are trying to help people. How can you shrink it down into one sentence that explains how you create impact, how you help people? I tell you mine in the beginning of every episode. So you see how I've literally been using my framework, right? And then M is for a method. The method is just how you will create that impact. So for example, I have a podcast, I have a course, I have a masterclass, I have different things that I offer to help you become the best version of yourself, right? But God ultimately tells you what your purpose is and helps you get clarity. But the framework that I have, I teach it in a way that helps you make sense of what it is you want to do, what passion project you have, the assignment that God has given you. I help you apply the framework to it so you can get clarity on how exactly you can execute it. Okay, so to summarize, the 4 things that you need to do to lock in for the rest of the year to go into 2026 as the best version of yourself is: number 1, create a vision for your life in 2 of the areas that I specified. Number 2, reinvent yourself. Number 3, upgrade your standard. And number 4, refine your purpose. And these are the 4 things that I actually teach you how to do in my course. I actually break it down and help you apply it to your life. And if you are someone who knows that you need to reinvent yourself and start walking in your purpose, because maybe the life you built for yourself looks good on paper, you were checking the boxes, you worked really hard for something, but you got to a point where it's like, I am not walking in my purpose. I know there has to be more to my life. I am ready to reinvent myself and actually do the things that God is calling me to do, but I have no idea how to do it and I need help. If that is you, then go to secludedthoughts.com/masterclass. I have a free masterclass that will show you how to reinvent yourself and start walking in your purpose. And I'll cover the framework that we just discussed, but I will also tell you the truth about why your life looks good on paper, but you still feel unfulfilled and what to do about that. And I will tell you the truth about walking in your purpose. And there's also a special bonus at the end that you cannot find anywhere else. So if you are interested and you are ready to finally start walking in your purpose, you're ready to finally reinvent yourself and start doing what God created you to do, you're ready to become the best version of yourself, then go to secludedthoughts.com/masterclass. That is all I have to say today in this episode, and I will talk to you next Sunday.